Good evening. My name is Lawrence Berliner. I'm an attorney in the field of special education law. I want to welcome all of our individuals who have registered for tonight's webinar. We are continuing, Jane Faherty and I are continuing, it's hard to believe we're finishing our second full year of doing the webinars, finding your voice as a parent, taking ownership of your child's challenges in the educational journey. This was originally brought on by the COVID-19 health emergency, and we are apparently still in the midst of the pandemic almost 3 years later. In addition to myself, Jane Faherty, the Stamford JCC, is the co-host of tonight's webinar. During the past 2 years, we've come together as a community of professionals, parents, educators, learning how to connect with one another to get through these very difficult times. For the past year, we've been moderating a series of webinars that address issues that come up in these unprecedented times. The need to address the impact upon your child's special education journey could not be greater. We've gathered again tonight to address your questions, your frustrations, and we hope to provide some success and empower you for the road ahead. Jane Faherty is the director of the JumpStart program at the Stamford JCC in Stamford, Connecticut. We have 3 very special guests this evening. We have Kaufman, who is the director of the Cedar School in Greenwich, Jennifer Shirazi, who is the director of Enrollment at Eagle Hill School in Greenwich. And we have Suellen Inwood at the Easton Country Day School in Easton. And we'll let each of our guests introduce themselves and discuss what they do as the director of admissions or the overall director of their respective schools. Before we begin, I just want to provide a disclaimer. The webinar is being recorded. The information provided during the webinar does not constitute specific legal advice to you or your child's circumstances and should not be relied upon as such. The webinar does not establish an attorney-client relationship with myself, Attorney Lawrence Berliner, or does it establish any professional relationship with the Stamford Jewish Community Center, the Cedar School, Easton Country Day School, Eagle Hill School. By signing up, you've agreed to receive information about future webinars from the Stamford Jewish Community Center and the Law Office of Lawrence Berliner. Please note that the Zoom is a third-party provider. It's not an agent or associated with the Law Office of Lawrence Berliner, Stamford Jewish Community Center, Easton Country Day School, Eagle Hill School, or the Cedar School. We have some questions that came in advance of tonight's webinar. If you are going to ask questions during the webinar, we welcome that and we'll get to them as time allows. We would ask that you use the Q&A format at the bottom of your computer screen and not use the chat. The reason is this is being recorded and everything that's in the chat is being recorded, but the Q&A is not. So in an effort to maintain privacy and confidentiality, we ask that you use the Q&A format. I might also add, because we have people from other states and in some cases other countries, that we're focused primarily, but not exclusively, on Connecticut, the resources in Connecticut, the laws of Connecticut, even though we're dealing with federal laws such as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the federal special education law. So without further ado, I want to turn this over to our co-host Jane, and then in turn, each of our guests.
Hey, thank you, Lawrence. It's lovely to be back again. I can't believe we're at the end of a second school year. It's been a long one, but it's great to be back here tonight. And it's really delightful to have 3 different schools represented, that we can learn more about. And the nice thing about these schools is they're all quite different in terms of the population and the ages that they support. So it'd be great to understand more about their services this evening. And in regard to any topics or trends, it's really just been a very busy time for PPT meetings, wrapping up the end of the school year, looking forward to the following school year. And as always, it all comes down to data and developing that rapport and connection and communication with your district as well as PPT teams. So without further ado, we've got 3 schools here tonight, so it'd be great to start introducing them. So we have Suellen for Suellen Inwood. It's Easton Day and Country School. So I'm going to hand you over to her first.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm from the director of Easton Country Day School. We started the school actually 30 years ago for our own children. Believe it or not, we were all educators who wanted something different for our children. And I happened to be the special education person. I was actually working in public schools at the time. I come from Northwestern University with a degree in learning disabilities and also a degree in preschool special ed. So when we started the school, I was the one that said everybody deserves a specialized education. And we've continued that process throughout the last 30 years, which seems amazing that it's been that long. We are very unique, I think, as far as schools are concerned, because 30% of our population are highly gifted students, and often along with highly gifted does go twice exceptional, not always, but often. 40% of our children are typical peers, and 30% of our children have learning disabilities that we work with. So it's a very diverse and wonderful environment. We call it a celebration of differences, and our children feel very, very comfortable with each other. And actually it becomes a very community-based feeling. Often when students who do have some issues arrive at ECDS, they have difficulty in learning new information, asking for help, developing relationships with peers and teachers. Their confidence may be low. They need tools to self-regulate. And basically they need the ability to access their education. So we provide specialized programming for each child, which is where I came in. So it is a lot of work, but each child that comes in, we develop their own program. We develop their own schedule. We do have OTs that work at the school and speech pathologists. We have a sensory integration room. But along with that, and I will say that even our typical peers often need access to some of those things sometimes. We also have everything from social skills, theory of mind, specific executive function programming, tutoring in any of those things, as well as music, art, drama. Our drama program is absolutely fabulous. They actually have their productions in Fairfield at the Fairfield Center. And we find actually that a lot of our twice exceptional children are fantastic on stage. And it is a really amazing way for them to show their talents, but not only that, but to learn some of the things that we're trying to teach. We do have special ed teachers. We have regular ed teachers. We use SMARTS programming for our executive function, and we teach it explicitly, but we also teach it throughout the years in different ways, along with, as I said, theory of mind and those kind of programming. We use, we have Orton Gillingham trained classroom teachers. We have certified Wilson programming. We use all of the programming that you might expect in a special needs school is there for our children, as well as vertical integration. So especially for our gifted students, we allow them, all of our students, to achieve according to their ability. We have our biggest difference this past year, who just graduated. He came to us in 2nd grade, and I asked to write something about springtime, and he wrote the whole score for Vivaldi's Springtime. And I said, oh boy. Okay, so he just graduated high school as an 8th grader, but we were working with him to not go to college, obviously, but there is a 2E component to that as well. And then we have our children who, like I said, they have learning disabilities, and we have programming available for them. Our bar is high because it's college prep and we have typical peers. So we're obviously servicing them, all children. So it makes quite an experience as we specialize for each child, but that's kind of the overall picture of who we are.
So something I learned earlier this evening was that you take children as young as 6 weeks old.
Yes, we do. Yes, we have a preschool all the way up through high school, and it's delightful, as many of our older children love to work with younger children. So there's a really nice, like I said, it becomes a very nice bonding experience in many different ways. So yes, we do.
Thank you. We did get one question, which I'll take right now. Copies, if you've registered for the webinar, you'll get a copy immediately following of the conclusion of tonight's webinar. So whoever asked that question, copies of tonight's webinar recording will be sent. Who wants to go next?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
All right, thanks, Clay.
Volunteer.
So
Good.
I am Jennifer Shirazi. I'm the Director of Enrollment at the Eagle Hill School in Greenwich. I went to Bank Street College of Education and got a degree in early childhood general and special education. And I've done work both in general ed and special ed, which really put me in a good spot to do admissions at a school like Eagle Hill, and also to understand where the kids have sort of been, kids who have come from a general ed environment who are moving on to the special education environment. Eagle Hill is a school for kids with language-based learning disabilities. And we teach students ages 5 to 15. So for those 5-year-olds, we talk a lot about how kids have fallen behind academically, right? They've fallen behind, they apply to a school like Eagle Hill. 5-year-olds haven't really had all that much time to academically fall behind, but that's where that real language-based piece comes in. Their language is delayed. They're not developing those early learning skills, those early phonics skills, the pre-reading, that number sense, all of that. So we sort of look at that from an early age and all the way through our 8th graders who may be, really functioning below their academic grade level. We have about a 4-to-1 student teacher ratio and divide classes up based on not what grade kids are in, but what age they are and their academic skills. So our skills-based classes, reading, writing, math, have between 4 and 6 kids in them, all within about 1.5 years of each other in age, working at the same level, who need the same type of instruction. The content classes, a little bit bigger. We want kids to have fruitful conversations, have opinions about the books that they're reading. It doesn't really work to have a debate if you only have 4 kids in the class, or at least not a very deep one, right? So those are a little bit bigger. And we do a lot of work around skill building and strategy development as it relates to academics, but also in terms of executive functioning. Executive functioning and social skills as well. We have a lot of time for kids to practice the social skills that they may be taught. Sorry, I'm having like an allergy attack. That they may be taught in a speech and language group or in a group that our psychological services team may run. They do a lot to develop those social skills, discussing the social emotional side of being a kid, especially a kid with a learning disability. So, excuse me. While there are those small groups, the speech and language pathologists, the psychological services team also integrate into the classes so that nothing is being taught in isolation. It's all being practiced throughout the day. Those same teachers are at recess, they're at the lunch, they're in the lunchroom, sitting at the lunch tables. They're coaching kids, they're teaching PE. So there are these special education teachers who are always sort of there to help support throughout the day. Our kids also can participate in team sports. They play against other local middle schools. They have art, like Suellen was saying, some of these kids have amazing artistic abilities and they have the opportunity to show those in the art room and during our activity time, which is similar to a club time. So that's really where we are. And most kids are at our school between 3 and 4 years. There's a lot of different reasons that we could come up with that number, which could be another whole conversation. And then they often will go to, some of them will go back to district. About a third of our kids will go back to their public school districts. About a third will continue to a specialized school, such as Cedar perhaps. And others will go to a more mainstream private school that maybe continues to offer some support, but doesn't have quite the support level that Eagle Hill has. So that's kind of where we fit into things. And I'm sure we'll get into some more details in a little bit.
Great, thank you. Over to you, Claire. That was a nice segue that you made there with reference
Thank
to
you.
Clay's school too.
I'm honored to be here with Easton Country Day and Eagle Hill, two fabulous schools, and just thrilled to be here tonight. So the Cedar School, the difference was we are a high school, and we are for bright college-bound students who have mild to moderate language-based learning differences, such as dyslexia, expressive and receptive language, challenges reading, writing. So we are focused on the language-based piece, as Jennifer was saying about Eagle Hill. We really are getting the students ready for college. So it's more content-based in the sense of we'll take the typical algebra, geometry, algebra 2, we're going to take sciences, environmental science and chemistry and so on. So we are getting them ready for college, and that's how our classes are organized. We have 10 students in a class. Again, as Jennifer said, it's big enough in high school, you really want to have a conversation going. 10 students is great because it's also small enough that everybody can participate in a class and everybody can get the attention of the teacher. We really focus on the skills, though, that we want the students to have for college and for life. So that's self-advocacy, independence, using your tools, understanding when to use your tools, learning which tools work for you. We spent a lot of time, this is actually our first year of school. We just finished our initial year with 16 students. It was very exciting. Our goal is to grow to about 120 students in grades 9 through 12. We are working with the students on those skills. All of the students have these language-based learning differences in common, so they're all together. We do have 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade classes, so we do divide up that way. But again, while we're teaching content, it's really a vehicle for the skills that students need for college and for life. So you really don't have to memorize all the presidents in order to get ready for college, in order. We want to make sure that they're learning their reading and writing skills, their research skills, their critical thinking skills, their analytical skills, synthesizing information. Those are the most important things. We do have students who have executive functioning challenges, so we certainly work with them on that and organization. And different students have different kinds of needs, so we want to make sure they have a variety of tools that they can use. So for example, we have we have students working with a planner for their homework, so they know what their homework is. Some students prefer a paper planner, some prefer a digital. So we want to make sure they're using what works best for them. We really want to empower the students so that when they go to college, they can have the tools that work best for them. We have teachers who have experience and trained in working with students with learning differences. We have a wonderful curriculum coordinator who's overseeing that, who's done lots of training in her career. I myself have been at this as a school leader for about 15, 16 years now. I was head of a school down in Maryland for 12 years. It's a similar school that was actually grades 4 through 12. So what we see is that the students really want to be challenged intellectually, but they don't need to be overwhelmed with content, overwhelmed with the amount of reading. And I think that what we're seeing now is that the huge emphasis that sometimes you see across the country on plowing through material, racing through it as quickly as you can, reading 30 books in a year, it's very stressful and it's just too much. You don't have to read 30 novels in the English class to be able to learn how to think critically and how to be able to analyze literature and to be able to write about what you're reading. So we really want to make sure the students are getting a reasonable amount of work, but are always being intellectually challenged. Because our students, like the students at the other wonderful schools, they don't want material dumbed down. They want to be challenged. They want to be thinking about the big topics and the big issues. As Jennifer said, our students are very strong in the arts, very creative. So arts is something the students at the Cedar School take every day. We have art and photography this year. We'll be expanding that to include the performing arts. Can't wait to get big enough to be able to put on our first musical. And so that is a really important part of what we do. And not only as a separate class every day, but also the arts are integrated into every single class. Our students learn best in a multisensory way. So that means using visuals, using color coding, using music, using anything that's hands-on or experiential. All of those help students access the content through their strength areas. So for example, this year they were working in their US history class talking about the civil rights movement. They studied Jacob Lawrence's paintings about the African-American experience in their history class and in their art class. And they did a project on Jacob Lawrence in the art class so that they were using, again, a strength area to help them access the information. We also take time to make sure they have plenty of experiential learning opportunities. So for example, we take field trips every month. And yes, it takes them out of the classroom, but they're so much more memorable. We took all the students down to MoMA in New York City this year and looked at the Jacob Lawrence migration series and the Gordon Parks photography series they had studied in their classes. Getting out there is so memorable, and seeing the art in person really makes a difference. We also have an internship program. So for 2 weeks every year, every single student for 4 years volunteers for 60 hours at an area of business. And this year we had students working for museums. Somebody worked at a movie theater, running the projectors and helping run programming for younger children. We had students working at schools. We had somebody working for a professional makeup artist. And we had 2 students working at WPIX TV in New York City in the newsroom. And one took photographs and actually got a photo credit on the PPX TV website. So they came back really energized with this amazing real world experience. And so again, we want to make sure that we are getting them ready for college. The numbers for kids with learning differences, the numbers, the data, when you look at college is horrifying. Something like 20% of students actually graduate in 6 years if they do that at all, if you have learning differences. What we do is want to make sure not only do they get into college or some kind of program in art school maybe, but they also can graduate in 4 years. That is the goal. And that means getting the skills ready so that they can do that. And also being very thoughtful to find colleges that have good learning centers, that have some support of exactly what Suellen was talking about, making sure that for kids who need it, you've got those kinds of supports. But our students, the goal is they should be ready for a mainstream 4-year college if that's what they want, as long as that college has some kind of learning center, some kind of support there.
We've placed the contact information for each of these schools in the chat section. So if anybody wants to follow up with the Cedar School, Easton Country Day, or Eagle Hill, please do so. Jennifer mentioned something that happens to dovetail with one of our questions, and that is, what happens after, say, in the case of Eagle Hill, which ends, at 8th grade, do you help students transition for whatever that next step is, if they're going to another private special ed school, such as the Cedar School or Easton Country Day, which go beyond the 8th grade, or back to a public school?
Yeah, I mean, one of our things that we really think about very carefully is what is that next step for the Eagle Hill student? We feel like we're successful when we help a child find what is best for them after they leave us. And like I mentioned, sometimes it's back to their district, sometimes it's another special ed school, sometimes it's a private school that has some good supports, just like Clay was talking about with the college, right? You want them to go someplace that's going to support them in a way that they need. We do have a director of placement on our team who works very closely with families to think about what the family wants. Are they looking at a boarding program? Do they want their child back in their home district? And then collaborates with the academic team at the school, which is the hugely important part, is that everybody involved is on the same page and understanding where a child is in their learning. Do they have the executive functioning skills and the self-advocacy skills to go to a mainstream setting? Because if they can't say, hey, I need this to be able to learn in your class, then they're not ready for that. They need a school that's still going to work on that. Like Clay was saying, they do at Cedar, right? We work on all those skills too, but sometimes a child's come to us in 7th grade, they're with us for 2 years, they don't have that skill down yet, right? So we do a lot of communicating between our academic team, so we know where the kids are academically, the parents to know what the parents and the family want, the student gets involved in that conversation sometimes, and then we make recommendations and have families go and look at those schools, see what those options are. Not all the districts offer the same type of support in the same areas, so what district you're talking about becomes important. So there's a lot of different factors, and it's something that we, as a school that ends in 8th grade, take very seriously, but it's the same process if we think a child is ready after their 4th grade year to move on. We'll talk to all of those same folks I just mentioned to make sure we're finding the right placement, because that's sort of how we measure success. We're not having kids go off to college yet, right? There's a number of years between when we leave them and that would happen. So we want to get them to the next, to the setting that's going to be best for them after they leave us.
Thank you. We did have one question that came in, and this is for all 3 of our guests. What is your application process if somebody wants to, contact you and have their child attend, potentially attend your school? Is there an application, tours, records review? If you could go over that.
You're muted, Suellen.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we do have an application process. Typically, someone will call the school and speak with one of us, and we'll make an appointment actually for the parent to come and visit so that we can really sit down and talk about the specific child. So we do have open houses. We'll again have open houses this coming year, but that's our primary way of looking. So typically it's myself. We will sit down and have an in-depth discussion about the program and about your child specifically, because we do individualize everything. And we have such a diverse population that we really need to speak to where your child fits in that population. Then an application needs to be filled out. And we also need to have as many records that support who your child is. If your child is coming in with an IEP, of course, we want that, but we also want your information that says, is this something that you feel actually speaks to your child? Because it's not always that way. So we'll have a conversation about that. Anything from a neuropsych really helps. Any kind of paperwork that we can get that really helps us to determine. And then there'll be a time for the child to come and visit. And we'll have a visitation day. And then the team will get together along with the parent to determine where the child would fit, whether, basically where the child would fit, or if we feel like there needs to be another step before us, we'll tell them that too.
Well, I guess I'm just going to, before we talk about the other 2 schools, I just want to ask Lawrence a question. So when a parent is dissatisfied with their child's existing school, or they feel that there's a better fit for their child out there within the community they need to explore, how should a parent proceed when the district has refused either to transition a child to an outplacement, to a school that is therapeutic and is recognized as being specifically therapeutic for a certain child? How should a parent proceed when they feel that the current school district options are not the best fit for their child?
Well, that's a multifaceted question. I'll do my best. The federal law, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, has had a free appropriate public education standard since 1975, when this law was first passed by Congress. Free means without direct cost to the family. Public and education is what public school districts do. And it comes down to this word appropriate, which unfortunately Congress never defined. So we've had at least 2 United States Supreme Court decisions, one in 1982 and one more recently in 2017, that have given us some contours. Is the IEP based upon the student's unique needs, not what's available in the district or the school building? Are the goals and objectives robust and ambitious? Is the child making meaningful educational progress, not trivial educational progress? And depending on how those questions are answered, will determine whether or not a child, a student, is receiving a free, appropriate public education. We always start with the public school, the neighborhood school, when the school district is determining eligibility and writing an IEP, an individual education plan. And if the IEP is not conferring that free, appropriate public education, then typically parents have, there's really basically two choices. We can bring more resources within the public school setting, or parents sometimes explore out-of-district placements, such as our three guests tonight who operate private special ed schools. And if the parents can make the case that an out-of-district placement can provide a free, appropriate public education, then our PPT, that's our IEP meeting here in Connecticut, will make a determination to either grant the parent's request or deny. If the PPT grants the parent's request, then they will make a placement. And this was one of the questions that came in this evening. The PPTs in Connecticut will only make placements at approved private special ed schools. And we have a list published by our State Department of Education. Now, if you have schools that are not on the list of approved private special ed schools, often in my practice as an attorney, we will get into settlement discussions with the school district. Every family should be receiving a copy of their procedural safeguards. Those are your rights as parents. Those are your child's rights as a student with a disability. And one of the many rights involves dispute resolution. And dispute resolution can involve mediation. It can involve a due process hearing, which is a formal trial-like hearing. In Connecticut, about 95% of the requests for due process hearing are settled. I don't know about the mediation because that number is not published annually. So you monitor your child's progress. Sometimes you have to have outside evaluations to validate your concerns as parents. And if you, as the family and the school district, can reach a consensus opinion on next step, great. We'll bring a specialized program into this public school setting. Or if that's not going to happen, then we look at out-of-district placements. And I want to also say, because a school is not on the list of approved private special ed school, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. Any more than being on the list means there's something right with that school. I don't get into the business decisions of private special ed schools, why they're on the list or not on the list. That's an internal decision. But all of the schools we have represented tonight are excellent schools. They are not approved private special ed schools. So a PPT would not make a placement, but that doesn't mean we cannot get into settlement discussions with the school and see if there's some equitable cost sharing of the costs of tuition, transportation, any related services that are available at the private special ed school. So,
And I just wanted, oh, go ahead.
well, I was just saying, it's a complicated process, and that's why I said it's a multifaceted question. I hope I answered it. Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, that was great. That was a great answer. I just wanted to say that our school, it was a conscious choice not to be a special ed school. And I'm sure it was for everyone. For us in particular, as typical peers would not come to a special ed school, unfortunately. So if we were on the list, and that's to me, that's a bit sad, but it's kind of where we ultimately made that that choice, was that to have that mix of students with typical peers, as well as peers who are twice exceptional or have learning issues or language-based learning issues. We needed to not be a special ed school. That doesn't mean we don't have special ed teachers. It doesn't mean we don't have special ed programming. Yeah.
And I think that's the nice thing about the panel tonight, is that each of the three schools offer something very different and unique for the children and for the families. And you can really meet everyone where they're at. And that's not to say that every school is the right fit for every child, which is why it's nice to have choice. And that's why tonight we have 3 schools represented, because each of them offers something slightly different, whether it's age group or areas that they have a more focused area that they, you know, excel at. But I would just caution parents that you know, you need to really connect with the school. You need to visit the school in person and do your own research and due diligence before you make the decision as to which school is the right fit for your child. Because, you know, every school has something different to offer, and your experience might be very different to another parent's experience, and your child's experience might be different to their child's experience. So it really is a unique time to explore. And you really have to connect and see it for yourself and feel it for yourself to know what's the right fit for your child in particular. So yeah, so any other comments, Clay or Jennifer, in terms of your admission process that you follow through for parents and students?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so there's a number of things that were just said that I kind of want to pull together a little bit too, in terms of the admissions process and all of that. And Jane, what you were just saying about that idea of different schools for different kids, I can't tell you the number of times I say that in my office when I'm talking to parents, that not every special ed school is for every child who is struggling to learn, right? There's lots of different reasons why a child might be struggling to learn. And, you know, Eagle Hill isn't going to be the school for every single one of them. You know, none of us have schools that can address the needs of every child, right? Exactly. I think it would be absurd to say that. And so there are reasons that we do have to say no, right, through the process. Just because you have a piece of paper that says your child is learning disabled, what else is there? What else is going on? What needs does your child have? Can we meet them? Who are we? Who are they? And what are your goals? You know, do your goals as a family match up to our goals as a school? And so I think that is a big part of it. And so one of the things, I know one of the questions that came in tonight was sort of, how do you make that decision about when it is time to move to a you know, a private special ed school? And I think that goes along with everything that we're saying, right? If you feel like your child's needs aren't being met where they are, if they're coming home every day emotionally distraught, right? You know, something needs to change, but it doesn't do any good to put them someplace that still isn't going to be the right fit. You know, that square peg round hole isn't going to be any better. So I think part of our admissions process is similar to Suellen's, right? We have the open houses. We allow people to hear sort of our spiel, right? We have a slideshow. We talk about who we are. We talk about our program. But that next step, I think, is what's really important, where families upload a whole lot of documentation. We do require an evaluation. It can be a private neuropsych, it can be through the school district, but we do require an evaluation. We ask for school report cards. We ask for any evaluation that you've had. While we don't require speech and language evals, if your child has had one, please send it to us. You know, the more information, the better equipped we are to make that determination as to whether or not we can support your child. Once we get all that, we talk to the parents. We add, you know, I always say to parents, so what can you tell me that I couldn't tell from reading? You know, I read that neuropsych, all 34 pages of it, front to back, but that's just one part of the story, right? So what does it look like in real life? So then at that point, if we think the child could be a good fit, then we'll invite the student in, and then we'll do some academic evaluations. Sometimes we'll have a student visit a classroom. Sometimes we'll have them work with one of our speech language pathologists. Often we'll ask our psych services department to read a file if there seems to be a little bit more emotional or behavioral pieces to the child than we are accustomed to. You know, we really do focus on the academics. So we'll ask people for their input if we feel like we need it. If we don't feel like we're the right school, we make recommendations. You know, we will say, Eagle Hill is not right, but I really want you to go look at these other schools. And it could be because they do more support around the behavioral and emotional piece. Or maybe a kid doesn't need quite as much support as we're providing, and so we can make other suggestions. I really do believe that it's not that the child isn't right for us, we are not right for the child sometimes. And so I think it's an important thing for parents to understand. And I think that's true, honestly, whether you're looking at a special ed private school or a general ed private school. Not every school is for every kid or every family. And so I think part of our admissions process is really trying to get a sense of if we're the right school. And we want parents, like everyone on the panel has said so far, we want parents to want, to make that connection, to feel comfortable and to feel like we are giving something that they are interested in, right? They shouldn't make it fit either. None of us should compromise, I don't think. So through all those steps in the admissions process, we try to get to that fine point where we're saying, yes, we think your child will thrive here. Anyone would do better in a classroom that's so much smaller than where they were, right? Anyone would do better. We don't want just better though. We want kids to be able to thrive. So that's kind of where we try to get, through our whole process. So it was sort of a long-winded way for me to get back to that. So sorry about that.
Yeah, and I just think it's important for parents to know this isn't a pass or fail. If you make an application to one of your schools, it's not a question of passing an admissions test or failing an admissions test.
Right.
It really is about blending experiences and finding the right fit for your child.
Yeah.
And, I'd recommend that, we have different options out there, apply to maybe more than one and explore more than one.
Yep.
And then with, obviously then with you, Clay, parents are coming in probably after being through a plethora of schools before they reach the high school age and phase. So you're probably seeing parents be rather frazzled at this experience and probably highly concerned about the 4 years that they now have before making the next transition for their child's education. So what's the process like for parents entering your school?
Sure. So Jennifer put it beautifully, as did Suellen. It's very similar. We want to have all the paperwork. We want to have the testing. We want to make sure we understand this child and see if this is a good fit for the Cedar School. And about half of our students are coming from public schools, about half from private schools. So it really can be a different kind of experience. I think the bottom line is, for students maybe coming from a school like Eagle Hill, and we have some wonderful Eagle Hill kids, they already know, look, I need some extra support and I know what I need, but I just need a little extra push to get through high school, because high school is a big jump from middle school. There's a lot more that's asked of you. So sometimes students coming from mainstream private schools or from public schools are coming to us, and what parents are seeing is self-esteem that's kind of plummeting. Students, their children saying, God, I'm stupid, when they know that this is a really smart kid. If your child is showing low self-esteem, is not motivated, is saying, why should I even try? I'm just never going to do well. Those are the signs that as a parent in your heart that this is not a happy child. This child needs something different. And if you're seeing that, and your gut is telling you that something isn't working, then it really is important to explore your options. It doesn't mean necessarily you'll go someplace else, but explore your options. Really, really important when the students, especially as they're getting to middle and high school, if they are feeling frustrated in school and they're not feeling good about themselves, that's going to make it very hard for them to learn. So really, really important to listen to your child and what they're saying to you and what you're hearing from them about how they're learning. If they feel way behind all their peers, but your child is smart, well, maybe they need a different setting. They just need those skills. We all just need to make sure that our students get the skills they need to be successful, and the kids can be successful in so many different ways. So that's what our admissions process is all about, is figuring out, what do you need? Is it a language-based learning difference, and can we support it? Similarly, we're not a therapeutic school, so if it's their bigger behavioral or emotional needs, that might not be right for Cedar, but there are other schools that do address that. But we want to make sure that we can bring in the child into the Cedar School, and we know that they're going to get everything they need during the course of their time, their 4 years at the school.
We received a question this evening about referrals to private schools, and can a school district restrict the number of schools? And there is a state regulation that requires approved private special ed schools to allow a parent to visit the school without permission from the public school system. But each of the 3 schools that are on tonight's panel, tonight's webinar, are not, quote, approved. So whatever their criteria is for visits, tours, private school, their rules. So if you're looking at an approved private special ed school, there are state regulations that cover the approved private special ed school. If you're looking at a special ed school that's not, quote, approved, it's their own rules. So the best thing is to send an email, make a phone call, find out what the protocols are. And if it's potentially the right kind of school, as Clay pointed out, Cedar School is not a therapeutic school. If you're looking for a therapeutic school, you may want to look elsewhere. If your child has autism, maybe these are the right schools for you. Maybe they're not, but there are other schools for children with autism. There are schools for children who have behavioral issues, psychiatric disabilities, and these are often the therapeutic day or therapeutic boarding schools. So there are a lot of resources out there. Certainly the three that are on tonight's panel, the State Department of Education has a list of approved private special ed schools. There are about 80 or so schools. You can look at that list. And then on occasion, parents will retain an educational consultant who will look literally around the country, not only in Connecticut, to see if there's a school out there. So careful consideration is very important. But back to the person who asked the question, the approved private special ed school cannot restrict your ability to at least have an initial visit.
And this was a question we actually had in. I'm going to direct it towards Suellen, but your Clay and Jennifer, you're more than welcome to jump in. So thoughts on twice exceptional schools or programs for children with externalizing behaviors? Are they children or situations that your school is, would support? Or Suellen, do you have any ideas or suggestions on this?
Absolutely. Again, I go back to finding the right fit. It has to make sure that, the school is, that the focus is exactly what the child needs in each school. We do have some children who are 2E. Often our children who are gifted may have come in with some high frustration issues. And we like to get these children when they're younger. And we do have some requirements when we do that they have the support they need to be able to maintain within the classrooms that we have. Often what happens so we're not a therapeutic school, okay? So we're very careful about how we look at children who have some of these behaviors, but children often exhibit behaviors because they're frustrated, they're scared, their sensory system is overloaded and they go into fight or flight. So we really look at, as much as we can, what are the causes of these behaviors? And we have a team, we have our OT, we have our speech people who really look at those pieces. And if we feel that this is a child who we can actually service by really looking at body first and having them be regulated, then we do take a child in and make sure that it's not like a long-term. This is a child that we feel we can help in the short term to be able to grow to be in a, kind of more typical without a one-to-one or something like that. So there are programs out there very different than ours. I do know, and it's, again, you need to go and look. There are programs that are very strict behavioral type programs, very therapeutic programs. And then we tend to be more on the self-regulation, executive function, really looking at the child as a whole and providing that sensory piece to help them to learn to regulate their behavior. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Can somebody just, for some parents, we keep saying a therapeutic school versus your schools. Can somebody just define what they consider a therapeutic school to be versus a private special education school? I don't mind who.
Yeah, okay.
Who wants to step forward?
You want to go ahead?
I mean, I can also say how we look at it, when we say we focus, on the academic side, and that we describe ourselves as not being therapeutic, despite the fact that we have a psychological services team to provide some support. For us, and I'm not sure if every school defines it the same way, but for us, if someone's emotional and behavioral needs are what is keeping them from learning, they need more than we can provide in terms of their emotional behavioral support. If a child is struggling emotionally because their academics haven't been supported and they're feeling down on themselves and their self-esteem has taken a huge hit and they have school anxiety because they keep failing again and again, we can probably support them. So our team is there to support kids through those types of challenges, but not to do regular daily or even weekly therapy beyond a couple of weeks when it might be helpful. For us, that therapeutic side would be a school that addresses those needs more, or at least as much as the academics. And so we'll often say, is your child's behavior or emotional state disruptive? Is it keeping them from learning? Because that's not what we do. We address those academic needs. We focus on, the reading, the writing, the math, the executive functioning, those skills, the self-advocacy, but we're not going to be able to help a child truly get to the root of an anxiety, a more generalized anxiety disorder. So for us, that's kind of how we talk to families about it. I don't think that's any sort of official definition, but that's sort of our working definition.
We have the same, we have the same approach. Exactly. Yeah.
And we're a little different. We look at it as body first. Let's get this child regulated. Let's have this child's body in a place where they're not going into fight or flight for whatever reason that may be. And we've had very good success in looking at these children just a little differently versus some therapeutic schools are necessary. We've had children who we definitely would say, you need to go and look at this other school or this other school. But there's so many, especially with COVID, we found an increase of children who, who may actually run out of the building, but they're not running out of the building because they've got emotional disturbance per se. They're scared. And so we're looking at that difference and saying, okay, they're in this heightened state of dysregulation. And what can we do? Which is why we have a lot of OT, a lot of sensory input. We have a lot of work that we can do in that area. So we're definitely, I would not say, we've never thought of ourselves as a therapeutic school, but I guess, there are some pieces that we definitely do in that way. And we do have the availability of BCBA input at our school.
We had one question. Are any of you planning on cloning your schools and opening them in the Hartford area? Franchise? One person would like your schools up in the Hartford area. Unfortunately,
I joke about it sometimes, when we're just having a rough day, let's just go, but.
Yeah, I know it's hard, isn't it? Yeah, it's hard because we do have students that come all the way from Danbury, New York, and I'm sure you do too, Mystic, Brantford, that are coming from a very, very long way. It would be nice. It's a lot of work to run the school that we have.
There are schools up, there are some that have some flexibility up there. The Watkinson School has a little variety of students. So there, if you do some research online, you find, there aren't enough of our schools, and just the wonderful schools that are here today, Eagle Hill's amazing, and Easton, about, and it's just, there aren't enough of these around the country, because we're seeing that it makes a huge difference where a child goes to school, and if they really need the right school. We created the Cedar School this year just for that reason, to serve the high school need, because there isn't another similar high school in the area. So, we need more schools like these wonderful schools.
We do have a 5-day boarding program at Eagle Hill where kids are with us Monday to Friday.
Wonderful.
So you're a little further afield, maybe not a flight, but a car ride. We do have kids who live on campus Monday to Friday, and that's available for kids who are 10 and up. So that's another sort of unique part of our program I should have mentioned before.
Actually, I will just jump in here and say that JumpStart will opening up a second program in Norwalk, because right now I have children coming as far as New Haven,
Wow.
Stamford, and they're 2 years old. So we are opening up a second program in Norwalk to try and support children that are, further north and further afield. This is the first one we're going to try, and then who knows, we'll take it there after.
That's great.
But it is a challenge for families to find schools in their localities beyond Fairfield. I mean, the pickings get quite slim the further up the state you typically go, and the further away from New York and the larger areas. So it is a challenge, and it is recognized by all of us here that it's a bigger need for more of your schools out there in the community.
I'm on the board for Research ILD, and one of the discussions is about COVID really showing all of the deficits in education. And I think that because of that, the need has increased. Well, no, the need hasn't increased, but the recognition of the need has increased.
Yeah, the level of anxiety is epidemic, just as the COVID-19, and it's important to have both public and private schools available to provide what a child needs on an individual basis. And just as all private schools may not be appropriate for a child, all public schools, and it's just trying to find that right mix, the right balance of academic success, support, modifications, and allowing, I often put this in adult terms. We as adults go off to work every day, and we want to get something back from our work. And I tell parents, your child's job right now is to go to school, but the difference between your child and adults is we can quit the job and go somewhere else. Our child can't quit school, and they can't get fired from school. So we have to, figure out a way to find that right balance for them so they will be successful. Because as everybody has said tonight, we're trying to prepare the students for their next step in life, whether it's elementary to middle to high school, or life after high school. And all of that's so critically important, especially at this time, these past few years where we've been dealing with all kinds of anxiety that's epidemic. We had one question about a high school student who's struggling to even get an average GPA. The parent has asked for specialized school, but has always been told by the school district they can help him. And how do you get a child to qualify in order to attend a specialized school such as yours? Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's a tricky thing, right? So I think that if you have a child who's struggling, and something has to change, unfortunately, the only thing you can do is push. And you can bring more testing, you can bring more evidence. Sometimes you have to get an outside evaluation, as you mentioned before. And you just have to push hard and say, my child isn't learning and is feeling anxious and is feeling like they have low self-esteem, and this is not right. I did have a family come to me a number of years ago at my school, and this was a brilliant kid who had very slow processing speed, working memory was really impacted, but verbally they were terrific. And so it was a big discrepancy between what their ability was and what they could produce. And so this poor kid, who was basically an A quality student intellectually, was getting C's, and was told, the family was told, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with C's. And there isn't anything wrong with C's if you're in the right setting and you're being challenged and you're doing the best you can. There is nothing wrong with C's. But if you're an A student getting C's because you're in the wrong school and they don't understand the way you learn, that is not okay. And so it's really important as a parent to push. And sometimes, unfortunately, you have to get you need an advocate to help you, somebody who specializes in this and can help you make the case. But parents, I know you all are devoted to your kids. And so, this is what we do. I have 3 kids of my own, and, you want to do everything you can for them. And sometimes it just means pushing really hard until you get what you need and just not giving up.
But I was just going to say, the nice thing about having the 3 of you here tonight is clearly all your schools, you have a high expectation for the students that come in. You want to meet them where they're at, and you want them to reach their full potential. Everybody's full potential is different, but you meet them where they are at. And that unfortunately doesn't always happen when resources are more scarce, or when people haven't had the ability to connect and engage with a child to understand what their full potential is. So not to cut you off, Suellen, but I think it is about that, helping everybody blossom to their full potential and understanding what that full potential might look like for that child. But that takes time, energy, and resources, and sometimes different diagnostic tools to really have clarity and understanding.
And I just wanted to say that having the child themselves come to the PPT, I found is an amazing way to make a difference. I, especially at the high school level, I highly recommend that the child themselves come and explain what's happening, because it's much harder to argue with the child than it is the parent.
Good point. Excellent point.
We're approaching the end of our hour for comments, questions, and I want to thank our panelists for their experience, their wisdom, their guidance. And I want to thank everybody who's continued to join us throughout the evening. We're going to take the summer off. Like, I hope many people will have some time to catch up and enjoy, but we will continue to keep a watchful eye on developments in the field of special ed law and issues over the summer. And we'll continue these webinars, these conversations with the new school year. Exactly when we'll send out announcements as we line up speakers. And as I said at the beginning, it's very hard for Jane and I to believe we're doing this for now the third year, but we do it willingly and with all the support that we have from the people who log on, ask questions, and we try our best to get to those questions. So we will send copies of tonight's webinar to you if you've registered. There will be YouTube postings for the webinar as well. There are accessible features on YouTube, which are not, unfortunately, not yet available on the Zoom format that we're using. I also want to, before I turn this over to Jane and our three guests, I just want to thank my daughter, Rachel, because without her efforts, we couldn't do what we're doing tonight and for the past 2 years. We, field all your questions, we do all the registration, and it's all the yeoman efforts that my daughter, Rachel, does that allows this to happen behind the scenes. So I have nothing further to say, except I want to wish everybody a happy summer of enjoyment, and we'll see everybody in the fall, and Jane and I will send out some announcements. So Jane, if you have any closing remarks.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. So I know that in addition to parents, we also have some therapists, we have some administrators and some educators that joined this conversation. And I'm very lucky in the role that I have when I've helped transition children to different schools with different specialist areas, that when going in and observing or seeing these classrooms, it's really broadened my knowledge and my understanding as to the different practices and strategies that are out there and available for students, whether they're teaching tools or just seeing how different educators are able to connect in that environment. If you are an educator or therapist and you're looking to broaden your horizons, it might be interesting for you, if with the consent of the schools, to go in there and see how it can be done in a different classroom environment, in a different educational setting, because you can take some of that expertise back to your own students and back to your own classroom or to your own administrators. I found it valuable, and then I'm able to share that when I go to different PPTs, or I'm talking to different teachers or therapists about different methodology that might be out there. So as well as going to explore these schools as a parent to see what's the best fit for you, there is some value, if allowed, and not that, just to broaden your knowledge of what it feels like to be an educator or a therapist in some of these different work environments, because you might learn something you can connect with, take back to your students or your team or other professionals in your district that they might not be aware of. And these schools are not supposed to be mystical, they're supposed to be available for us to learn and grow and share and connect with each other. So You might be surprised by taking time to have a conversation with someone like Suellen, what you learn, and then can share with the higher echelons of whomever you might be working with. I found all these conversations valuable. It helps broaden my knowledge and expertise, and as well as for parents, others might find it informative too. So other than that, I wish everybody a lovely summer and would like to pass on to Clay to say some closing remarks.
All I would add is that, and I won't speak, I think I'm speaking for everybody, we're more than happy to have you call us, right? Whether you're a professional or a parent, if you're just not sure, all you know is my child isn't really learning and I'm not really sure what to do, call us. We're more than happy to talk to you because we're in the business of helping kids find the right place. And as Jennifer and Suellen both said, if it's not us, if we're not the right place, we'll do our best to help you find the right place. But please don't hesitate to reach out because that's the way you get the right information so you can find the right place to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Clay just said. We're happy to, answer questions. My team is always happy to chat. I'll be on campus all summer. If people are looking for something fun to do over the summer, you're welcome to come to Greenwich, take a walk around our campus, ask some questions. It's always nice to have visitors come on the professional side. If you're looking as a parent to apply, we do have an open house coming up. You can find it on our website in July, but you can always send us an email, give us a call. We're happy to talk really at any point. So I absolutely agree with what Clay was just saying. And thank you, Lawrence and Jane as well.
And I wanted to thank Lawrence and Jane as well. It's an amazing way to communicate with so many people, administration as well as parents. And I would love to come and visit your schools. Even as educators, we need always to go out and see what's happening ourselves, because otherwise we don't grow and we don't learn, no matter what we're doing, whatever research that we've got ourselves going on. So I appreciate both of you, and I look forward to coming and seeing your schools. Thank you.
Well, on that note, let me thank everybody again and for all the people who have participated throughout the school year. And we look forward to seeing you next school year. So stay safe, stay healthy, and Jane and I will see you in September, I guess.
See you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye.